And good morning, Bills Mafia. That red light is on, which means this week's episode is officially alive. And before we kick things off, I want to let Aaron and Greg tell you about the Cover One Premium Pass.
Many people ask us the best way to support us here at Cover One, and that is to sign up to become a Cover One Pass member. That contribution helps give us the access to all the data and information we use to create the content that you love.
And I think most importantly, brings you into our community of insiders. It's a great community based on Slack. I know a lot of people don't want to be on social media anymore, be in on those conversations. We bring all of it to you right in our great community of educated fans. And most importantly, you get access to our content creators.
Even better than that, everybody loves merch. You get awesome t-shirts, a cool decal, and a letter from the Cover One team signed directly to you.
All for $60. That gets you the entire season, next year's free agency and draft. $60. Click the link in the description. Cover One Insider. Become one today.
Yes, please check it out in the description below. You get some awesome perks. One of my favorite parts is the premium Slack channel, something that you can engage with pretty much 24/7 with all Bills discussion, as well as some other cool perks. But my name is Joe DeRosa. You can find me on Twitter at @show_DeRosa. I am so happy to have you all here today. Joining me is another member of the Cover One Mount Rushmore. His name is Aaron Quinn, and we are going to be talking about Week 1 kickoff for the Buffalo Bills in MetLife Stadium against the new look New York Jets. So get ready because we're going to have a great discussion today. Let's go.
Previous play will go under review.
And once again, welcome everybody to this week's episode of Under Review. So happy to have you all here, and very happy for the first time ever to have the reason I am at Cover One, Mr. Aaron Quinn, joining me today. How are you doing, Aaron?
Joe, what's going on, man? I appreciate it. You know what, though? I appreciate the kind words there, but you got to stop saying that. You're the reason you're at Cover One, right? Like, Greg, I brought the idea of doing those spaces. So for people that don't know, Joe met us through spaces coming on those every Friday morning. If you haven't seen them, it's a lot of fun during the season. Buffalo Bills Football Friday, Cover One and Friends. Our producer of Cover One in Buffalo, Chris Kepner, and I were exploring spaces. And originally for us, Joe, it was a way for some of the guys that are writers on the staff that didn't have a place on the schedule for a show. We were like, hey, let's give them an opportunity to get some reps in, right? Mm-hmm. And it's spaces, so it doesn't matter. It's laid back. And then you kind of came in and we were like, oh, shoot, maybe this is also a recruiting area. So though, for those of you out there that are kind of wondering, and maybe people say, hey, you should have your own show. You love the Bills. You should do something, talk about them a little bit more. It's hard to get into the podcasting game for sure. It's easier to do it with a network. Spaces is a great way to go find, a lot of our Cover One guys are floating around, not just in my space, but in others. And so, yeah. You're selling yourself short by saying that it's me that's the reason you are at Cover One. I just got introduced to you, man. So you've been doing great work, and happy to be on the show. I'm sorry it hasn't worked out earlier.
No worries, man. Listen, I appreciate that. I got to give my flowers to the originals who spotted me and gave me the opportunity. So it means a lot, but I am excited to have you here to talk about, finally on this show, real regular season football. We've been waiting for it for so long. And what better matchup to talk about than against a divisional rival on the road in a hostile environment? My first question that I want to ask you, Aaron, is just simply, what are your thoughts about this game? Like, what are you expecting to see? Things that you could say you're excited about or kind of nervous about?
Yeah, well, it's interesting, right? Like, it is a division rival in the sense that you only have 4 teams in your division. You play them twice a year. There's familiarity. There's a long history of games there. But we were talking about it with our guest Connor Rogers from SNY and NBC Sports this week, and he's in his 30s, where I'm almost 40. Greg is in his 40s. I just want to clarify that I'm not yet, and he is. But we were talking about that stretch of our lifetime. And when you think about rivalries, right? Like, I don't think Bills were rivalries with New England, but we hated New England, right? You can't be a rivalry when they beat you straight for 20 years, but we hated them. Miami, there was a lot more when I was in the 90s, right? That was real rivalry, and there was big time games and a lot of games that were important for both franchises. when you look at the Jets' history, it isn't really there. The teams, when they have been good, it hasn't lined up to where they were both good at the same time and having those big battles. There's been a couple games where the Bills knocked Fitzpatrick and the Jets out of the playoffs.
Yeah.
So there's been a couple of big games in that sense. But in terms of the AFC East, I feel like maybe the least rivalry is with the Jets, or the least kind of excitement for matchups typically is with the New York Jets. But now everything changes, right?
Mm-hmm.
The last few years, it's been talked about this week. This matchup within the division seems particularly challenging for Josh Allen. Even when they win, it isn't the effortless moving the ball up and down the field. It's grinding out victories, getting a drive or two ahead of them. Even with a toothless offense last year, one of the worst times I've seen Josh Allen have in the pocket as a professional. This is a team that challenges the way the Bills want to play. And they've gotten better, right? Like, we can make fun of Aaron Rodgers all we want, but there was two teams heading into the offseason where I was like, man, if the Lions or the Jets, with the way those rosters are put together and how good they've been at adding talent, if either one of them gets good to adequate quarterback play going forward, like, those are going to be really dangerous teams. And say what you want about Aaron Rodgers, but if he is healthy, even with the decline at the age, it's such an improvement over what they had last year. So it's a huge matchup, and it becomes a rivalry instantly because both teams now are considered contenders.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you talk about the history of their matchup and some of the AFC East matchups in the past, and it's different for me because I grew up in Poughkeepsie, so that is Giants Jets territory, and I became a Bills fan from a family of Giants fans. So I have always steered away from the Jets, but you're surrounded by that. So for me, it's a little different because I'm always pushing to beat the Jets because I've just grown up not liking the Jets very much, and also other fandoms that I'm in are a lot of Jet fans coinciding, so I'm around it. I'm exposed to it. But yeah,
but Aaron, they haven't had success. Then firsthand. That's why I think a lot of Twitter and people are frustrated with, one, it's New York, so the media is going to hyper excite over any type of excitement in the New York market. And I know that annoys fans like us, but Jets fans are super annoying on Twitter right now. But come on, so are Bills fans.
Yeah.
When we got good that 2020 season, we got really annoying to other fans. They have some excitement. I talk about my brother who's a Bears fan all the time, and he's so dejected about football going into the season, and they're not competitive. To have it, I got to give them a little bit of a hall pass. They are annoying. I am muting Jets fans at an all-time high, but to complain about it, I totally understand where they're coming from.
100%, because remember 2019 to 2020, even though the team had just made the playoffs, the Bills were still seen as kind of this we don't know what Josh Allen's going to be. It's just going to be another team that floats. He's never going to reach his potential. And then Bills fans were dunking on everyone they could because Allen developed and became this stud quarterback. For the Jets fans, I understand completely and agree. There's optimism, and you have every right and reason to be optimistic considering you just got a Hall of Fame quarterback. Your running back room now has Dalvin Cook, who I still think can move. I know he's not as effective as he once was statistically. Breece Hall is already a great back. He just has to recover from that ACL.
And if he didn't get hurt, he might have usurped Garrett Wilson for Offensive Rookie of the Year. You had the two guys that were the running for Offensive Rookie of the Year. One just got hurt.
Yeah, exactly. Garrett Wilson's a stud. And then, of course, the defense, which we'll talk about a little later. There's a lot of reason for Jets fans to be optimistic. I completely get it. And yeah, I'm not sleeping on them. I've said that I do think they have a tough schedule, and how they start is going to be a huge factor in their season-long success. But I don't think it's a team you can really sleep on. It's no one in this division, really, I don't think. But while we talk about the Jets and when we kind of preview this matchup, the one thing I wanted to ask you to just start this whole discussion off is really, what are your expectations for the Jets offense? Obviously, it's different than last season. You have a new quarterback. Nate Hackett is now your offensive coordinator. They had a pairing in Green Bay. What do you expect to see out of a Jets offense that now has a new identity?
Well, first of all, talking about not being able to sleep on any of the AFC East teams, I will go on record that I am sleeping on the New England Patriots. I don't think Mac Jones is a competent NFL quarterback that can win games against top teams. So I will sleep on them. You can cut that up and put it out there for Pats fans if you want. But in terms of the Jets and the offense, that to me is the biggest question mark, right? Obviously, on paper, the idea of that plopping out a Zach Wilson and a Mike White and the level of play that they provided last year and putting in an Aaron Rodgers, again, to my point, even if you put the curve of age and decline that is expected, for him as long as he's healthy, that's a massive leap in improvement. Just from, I know that clip was floating out there of him calling out the Bucs safety or linebacker on the blitz. And you heard Micah Hyde in his press conference say, "Oh yeah, he used to do that to me all the time in practice." Like, Zach Wilson is not doing that. I know that clip was like a little bit overrated, and people are like, "Okay, like yeah, he's seen it." But the difference in being able to get the offensive line into the right protections, being able to know what defensive coverages are doing, even if you have that split second advantage. We talk about it in the middle linebacker side for the Buffalo Bills. That's, to me, the difference of a Kirksey and a Bernard is, hey, this guy's got experience, so what he lacks in athleticism, he's going to make up for in processing. Nobody's seen more right now in the NFL than Aaron Rodgers, right? Now that Brady's gone, this guy has seen it all. Everybody's giving him every type of exotic look. So just the experience alone should be a benefit. I don't know if I'm sold on Nate Hackett. How do you, like, I know there was success there in Green Bay, but I mean, Aaron Rodgers a couple of years ago, still in the sort of end of that prime ability. Devontae Adams, next level wide receiver. Right. I know Garrett Wilson is trending into that direction, but for the last 5 years in the NFL, the way we talk about Stephon Diggs, you talk about Devontae Adams, just unguardable, complete red zone freak. Like, defenses can't pin him in. So I don't know how much of it totally was Nate Hackett and how much was just him riding the coattails of Aaron Rodgers and some good talent they had in Green Bay, but we'll find out. And it's going to be interesting. I think the one thing we saw last year with Aaron Rodgers that was concerning to me, obviously, I know there was injuries and Green Bay talked about those, but that offensive line was a bit in shambles for him. And I don't know, even though they're getting healthy at the right time, I don't know that the Jets offensive line also won't be in shambles. So it'll be interesting to see the type of plays that Hackett is calling out, especially if teams like the Bills with the heavy rotation are able to get some of that early pressure. Is it going to be just like the quick hitting, get Garrett Wilson in space, slant routes, get the ball out of Rodgers' hands, allow him to use that quick processing to just find quick open guys and try to keep some of that pressure off him? Because to your point, it's a long season and a tough schedule for them. And if he starts taking hits early, like say they even beat the Bills, but the Bills are just banging in on him and getting hit, like that's the type of thing as a Jets fan you don't want to see. So I'll be interested to see how they scheme up the offense to take the toll off of an aging quarterback.
Yeah, 100%. And this is something Charles brings up too. A-Rod's a huge unknown. Will he be closer to MVP or the guy we saw last year? I think the guy you saw last year was kind of an unprecedented shell of himself, and not because of his play actually declining. I think, like you said, the offensive line was in shambles, but you also talk about the fact that it was a brand new receiving core with Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, these guys getting it together and figuring out the playbook. But then you talk about Allen Lazard essentially having to be your one at times, which he's not. He just isn't. So that all plays into a factor. And then you talk about Rodgers' hand injury and how that affected him. And then in the back half of the season, Rodgers starts picking it up. The rapport starts getting built. And these, once upon a time overthrows or miscommunications are being cleaned up. Now, when it comes to what you said about Nate Hackett, yeah, I'm not so sure, because the difference with Green Bay and the Jets is that the Jets head coach is a defensive-minded guy who will check in, but he's going to be overseeing his defense, similar to what you have with Sean
McDermott. And he's so
McDermott.
starstruck right now with Rodgers, he can't say anything.
Yeah, he's got the magazine cut out in his office. But he's going to be keeping tabs on them. But Hackett is ultimately the offensive guy now, and he's even said himself their communication channel is going to be booth to field to Rodgers, and kind of the system where you're almost seems like you're getting tabs on what Rodgers wants to do and letting him run it, right? And if Rodgers approves or disapproves, then that's going to dictate what happens offensively. Now, whether that's a good or bad thing is to be seen. I think early on, just with the way Rodgers has operated in the past in week one, with how new this all is, and I don't mean new with him and Hackett, but for him and the Jets, I could see there potentially being some early growing pains with room to be solidified as the year goes on. Do you say you see that?
Yeah, I can see it going really two different ways here. I think the most likely is that at least in this first week or two, there's some slow growing pains, but then they start clicking. Like, there's enough talent on this offense where, even in a sense, if that offensive line can stay healthy and be even average, I think the running back room is so good where you can take a lot of pressure off Rodgers in that sense with the running game and a nice balanced offense in a traditional way. Hackett is probably going to run some heavier set stuff. He's a little bit more traditional in that manner than some of the more modern, younger offensive coordinator types. And so I think they take some pressure off Rodgers, especially early on, knowing that it's a long season, knowing that it's a grind and it's ramp up to the playoffs type thing. So some of the warts that would be a concern, you may be able to hide a little earlier on too and play maybe a bit more efficient. But at some point, and this is the difference of the teams that are in the running for the Super Bowl and are true contenders, at some point, you're going to have to put the game on Aaron Rodgers' back, and he's going to have to take over a moment in a game. And that's what separates these great teams from the teams that are just kind of competing for playoff spots. And we haven't seen it now in about a year from Rodgers, and time is undefeated. Brady got the closest to beating time, but even there was a real fall off.
Yeah.
He had great roster around him, which Aaron Rodgers seemingly has right now, but it's, again, time's undefeated. It seems like a ticking time bomb. The New York media, the pressure, he's been cast away in Green Bay. And very much, as we know here in Western New York, you get a little protected when you're in a smaller area. Like Josh Allen kind of just sits in his house. A lot of the strays that he's taken this offseason would have been way more out of control if he was in New York or if he was in LA or one of these big cities, but he's protected up here in Buffalo. And Aaron has always been that way in Green Bay, and now he doesn't have that. And so we saw some tension between him and teammates through the media in Green Bay. Like if those types of things happen in the New York market, that's the kind of thing that could derail a locker room and derail a season. And those would be my concerns if I'm a Jets fan. Is not so much can they be good enough on the field, is can this team, this quarterback, this coach, after what we saw with Hard Knocks, are they going to be able to handle the pressure that comes with being a legitimate considered contender in the NFL? I don't know. It's really their first test, and they have a lot of young guys who haven't been through this before. And we can make fun of the Bills, and they've been knocked out of divisional round games and haven't been able to get past that AFC championship. But this roster is littered with people that have overcome seasons of adversity, big time losses, the media just ripping them apart, and people questioning the ability of the offense and all these things publicly and dealing with that. And those are all, they might not be football lessons and things that you take away in practice, but I think it does matter when you are up against adversity and the type of pressure that teams like the Bills and Jets are facing.
Yeah. And I'm really glad you brought up how Rodgers was essentially treated in the small market of Green Bay, how Allen's treated in Buffalo. I live in NYC. I'm from Poughkeepsie. I've been around New York media my entire life. I've seen it with every sport that I follow, specifically baseball, football, just how I've been exposed to it. That is why I emphasize, and kind of my main point with any Jets fan when I discuss with them in a civil way, is they better get off to a fast start. Because if they don't, where I worry, similar to your worries, is that going to affect the psyche of a team that has a lot of young players on it, that has Aaron Rodgers on it? Is this a team that in the face of adversity, when they go, let's just say they go 2-4 or 3-3, not earth-beating numbers, and they end up kind of slumping against some good teams, does that make you stronger, or are you going to fall apart? So with that in mind, I would bet on them figuring it out, because I do think at the back end of their schedule, it gets a bit easier for them. And I think that's a great opportunity. But I also think if you start the season with like 1 or 2 wins in like 5 games, that could be problematic, extremely problematic. So that's something that I hope for Jets fans' sake, they do avoid. But yeah, New York media is brutal, man. The New York Post waits to write headlines about you that are clever. They probably have a bunch chalked up right now if the Jets drop that game to the Bills, and it probably varies based on the score. So, yeah, I think it's a valid concern to say, hey, this team needs to figure it out quickly, because there's a lot of pressure, and getting the Hard Knocks cameras in your locker room does not help with that at all. But
yeah,
Aaron,
and it's real. Yeah, you saw the Bills face a lot of that pressure last year, basically being expected to go and compete for a Super Bowl. I think it's an advantage to them this year that there's so many people sleeping on them, right?
No, absolutely. And Sarah brings up a good thing here. It actually seems like Rodgers was really trying this preseason more than he has the past few years in GB. We'll see if it makes a difference or not. I think that also just comes with the fact that you're on a new team, like with Green Bay and LaFleur and Hackett being there for so many years. You kind of get the luxury of, all right, like I know who's on my roster. I still say like maybe reps are a good thing. I know, I'm not a huge fan of it, but in the case of him being on the Jets, it makes a lot of sense to get some reps. And he did. And, they ultimately look good. And William right here, this is another one that I want to talk about because I want to actually think about how they're going to attack the Bills specifically. And he says Rodgers will try to test the middle short. Big game for Matt and Jordan if they bring in to help. Yeah, 100%. I'm a firm believer that their game plan is going to be lean on Breece, lean on Dalvin. If Breece is playing a lot of snaps, I don't know if they'll have him on a snap count.
Yeah, right.
And then Rodgers is just going to try and exploit the middle linebacker. And this is a huge opportunity for Bernard because I think this is the chance to prove that you deserve that spot. But if he isn't ready and the coverage is bad, that's going to be tough to overcome against a really good quarterback who's great with timing. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think they're going to try to exploit the Bills in a number of ways. One, they're going to Bills fans don't get mad if Trey White gives up receptions to Garrett Wilson. Like they're going to force feed Garrett Wilson the ball. He is wide receiver number one. I think probably the most exciting appeal for Rodgers coming to them was having a young wide receiver who I always compare to Stephon Diggs. Like I think he is a Diggs type clone receiver with that type of ability. And Rodgers got to be drilling at the bit to go give him the ball. So he's going to get receptions. I'll be interested to see. I still think the Bills are going to be very heavy zone team. In the past, there's been games where they had Trey follow people around, but then there's also been moments where they didn't, and they let kind of just stay on the side of the field and do what they do and have the offense come. I'll be interested to see if the Jets are moving Garrett Wilson around, trying to get him matched up on a Christian Benford or trying to get him with a, in that middle linebacker area, if it's zone coverage, being passed off between Taron Johnson and Terrell Bernard and trying to confuse some of the rookie and how those passing off type of things go and giving them some option routes there. Those are going to be the interesting matchups to me to see how they attack the Bills. But I agree with you. I think every offensive coordinator right now is going to attack Terrell Bernard until he proves it, right? Like we don't know what to expect out of him. Either does the rest of the league. And when you kind of take the bird's eye view, that's how I break down the opponent every single week. I look over whatever side of the ball I'm looking and I'm like, all right, where are some of these weaknesses that I would first attack? And the two for me, if I'm a offensive coordinator, is I would prioritize middle linebacker, and then I would test Christian Benford because he's got limited film and he is a bit of a limited athlete, even though he's shown good film. I would test it until he proves otherwise because I'm not testing Trey. Even though the age of the safeties would make me want to take some deep shots and see if that range is still all in place, they've got enough proven where I don't want to test them. I definitely don't want to test Matt Milano. I think the line right now without Vaughn, the defensive line, is still a good unit and one of the better, more deep rotations that can just come in waves. And when they get Vaughn back, like there's just not a lot of chinks in the armor of the defense where I would really utilize my game plan to stress and to force those guys into conflict and say, hey, young, inexperienced player, you got to make a split decision here against Aaron Rodgers. If I'm Hackett, I feel pretty good that Aaron is going to make that right split second decision and Bernard's going to be off a second.
Yeah, 100%. That's just rookie growing pains. That's inexperience. It's starting at middle linebacker. That's a quarterback who has still a great arm and an accurate arm that can exploit that middle of the field matchup. Although I do like Roy's optimism here. Bills get pressure up the middle, causing Bernard to get a pick six. Listen, man, I would love it. I would 100% love that. I think the benefit to Bernard, or even if you want to talk about maybe even, Kirksey's not going to play yet, but down the road, is like you said, this defensive line, it doesn't have Vaughn right now, but it still has a lot of talent and also a healthy middle. And that's, I think, the most important part, because in that Rams game last year, you saw how effective Jordan Phillips, Daquan Jones, Ed Oliver were when they were all healthy, working together, being able to create that interior pressure. And I think that is the most important part of the defensive line, because Rousseau, I think, is going to have a great year. He's going to set the edge. He's one of the best in the league at it. That's fine. That'll help with the run. Obviously, Leonard Floyd, great pass rusher. And again, good run
also,
center.
Really good setting the edge there in the run game too.
Yes, which I gotta eat crow, Aaron, while I'm live and own up to my mistake. A couple months ago, I made the cardinal sin of looking at a PFF grade for Floyd's run defense last year.
Oof.
and made the assumption that he wasn't a good run defender. So I just want everyone to know I wear that.
I know people see the sack numbers from Rams his time with the Rams, and they were
Mhm.
good. But I've always thought that he's a better run, not a keep contained type edge defender, which will play very nicely when Vaughn gets back.
Yes, especially on opposing sides of the line. But why that's great, because you're essentially setting the table for your interior pressure to give Rodgers hell. And this is the question that I think Jets fans should have is, how is our inside of the offensive line actually going to match up with their D tackles? Because if Ed Oliver doesn't have to deal with double teams because you have Daquan Jones or Jordan Phillips or whoever next to him creating this pressure, then all of a sudden you have a huge matchup problem on your hands, and that could really disrupt things at the line of scrimmage. And I think, going back to the comment, it makes Bernard's life a little easier, because maybe you bait Rodgers into making a bad throw, or maybe Rodgers doesn't have time to hit that middle of the field throw and has to either throw it away or get out of the pocket. So
yeah.
Curious, just to kind of transition now, Bill's defense against their offense, what are you kind of expecting out of them?
So one of my biggest questions is, what is going to be the difference between Leslie Frazier calling this Bills defense and Sean McDermott calling this Bills defense? Leslie Frazier, really both Leslie Frazier and Tremaine Edmonds have been Bills Mafia's scapegoat for any time the defense didn't look perfect and it wasn't top in DVOA and everything, right? And this defense, when you look at their DVOA across the board, I think 1 year during the Leslie Frazier run, they were 12th. Every year they've been above that, which is difficult to do year over year in the NFL. I know the scheme gets a lot of crap, and one of the Vikings players even recently came out about how excited he is to not play in two-shell Leslie Frazier style defense and stuff, but Bills continuously put out elite numbers on the defensive side of the ball. And granted, it hasn't done well in postseason. I would contest that they've gone up against some of the best historical offenses in the postseason. Like, it is an offensive game now. It's harder when you get there. But now there's no more of that excuse, right? Leslie Frazier's been removed from the equation. Tremaine Edmonds has been removed from the equation. Sean McDermott coming in, I think, leads Bills Mafia and myself to have some optimism. I like the way that he did call defense in Carolina. It was a little bit more aggressive than what we've seen from Leslie Frazier, but it still had the core fundamentals, which I love about Sean McDermott's defense. I think people get frustrated with the idea that this defense is somehow vanilla or maxed out. But continuously, we always hear Sean McDermott is like revolutionizing the way defense is played throughout the league. At the clips that he plays nickel, you hear quarterbacks talk about we have a show on our network called Disguised Coverage because of the way that they are able to disguise coverages with interchangeable safety play and get into these different looks and still play basic zone looks, but confusing guys like Tom Brady, guys like Aaron Rodgers with some of the different designs that they are able to give. And so it's hard for us to say this is, a bad defensive scheme or anything like that. It tends to rear good results, but I'm interested to see, even if it's just minor, or even if it's big, like some of the stuff Greg has tried to say about getting Taylor Rapp involved more and getting a thick dime. Is he going to?
Hoping you were going to say it. I was hoping you'd say it.
If he's going to he revolutionized the way guys played nickel. And in the last couple of drafts, dude, when you fired up, go watch back on the draft. Every time they took after like that first round, every cornerback, they're like, this guy can play in the nickel. This guy can play all day in the nickel. Like, it's become, guys are looking for Taron Johnsons, for Molden type players that can be a linebacker type guy. Sean McDermott really revolutionized that in the NFL right now, and he's still ahead of that. Maybe Dime's his next evolution of this defense. I don't know. I'm excited to find out what he is going to do and what that difference is going to be, because you have so much talent on this side of the ball, and it's only going to get better when Vaughn gets back. And I think they can maintain that top tier ability. And some of the concerns that we have, inexperience of a Bernard, inexperience of a guy like Benford, I think they can mask a lot of it with the talent that they have around. I say it all the time. They got all pros at each level. Vaughn's out right now, but I actually think Greg Rousseau, after the step that he takes this year that I expect him to take, will be trending towards like second team all pro level. I don't know if he'll ever get there or not, but he'll be at that level of play and production. You have Matt Milano, who's already done it, and I think will continue to do it. You have obviously your safeties and Tre'Davious White in the defensive backfield. So you have a lot of ways to mask some of your warts. And then those guys have the athleticism, I think, to make up for the lack of processing that they have. So I'm interested to see how it all comes together. I think it will be more aggressive than we've seen, but he's not all of a sudden going to become Wink Martindale, and you're not going to see like throwing kitchen sinks. It's going to be tricky and in spots and strategic. And I think that might be the thing I'm most excited to see, is after 5 years of Leslie Frazier's defense with the same philosophies in place, how much different do we see this one?
Yes. And before I give you my point, Sophia, thank you so much for your donation. Really appreciate
Yeah,
that. She watches every week. She comments every single week. Great, great follow. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
very cool.
And for all of you watching, again, if you joined late, please drop a like on this video, subscribe to Cover One, link to the premium passes in the description, and please like all of the content that comes out on this great network. Everyone, Aaron, all of the people included, do such a great job at providing consistent content for you. If you enjoy Bill's content, want to keep up with it, this is the place to be. Subscribe, like, all of that good stuff. It helps us out a ton. But Aaron, I am so glad you brought up your ending point about McDermott kind of crafting it and being specific when he uses it, because that's what I wrote down, situational blitzing. Yeah. I think the difference with him is the timing of how aggressive he's going to be. I think you're going to see him send hounds on those longs, because one thing was this team did love having a four-man rush. They predominantly wanted to make that four-man rush work. And it did when Vaughn was healthy, when everyone was healthy, right? So for this week, I do see a reality where the defense is primarily sending four and not blitzing as often, because I do see an outcome where, again, interior defensive line causes so much pressure that there's no reason to send extra people and just drop them back into coverage. Mm-hmm. But I think with McDermott, that's really what I'm expecting out of him. I don't think it's going to be a Spagnuolo, Wink Martindale type of cover zero blitz like often where you're just constantly sending pressure. I think it's situational pressure or showing like, you know, a stack box or something pre-snap to indicate that you're sending pressure. And again, disguising it. That's where I think McDermott's going to win his battles this year. I think he has a great track record as a defensive coordinator. I know it's been a few years since he has, but it's not like the concepts he was throwing out are out of style or, you know, what's the word? Prehistoric. They're pretty modern NFL defensive concepts that work and are still used actively by good teams. I mean, Kansas City just won a Super Bowl with that mantra. And I think when we talk about Frazier to McDermott and evaluating the Bills defense, it's important to remember that if you talk about the playoffs, just a side note here, because you brought it up, again, you go up against the best quarterbacks and the best offenses. To hold them down to anything under 21 points is basically a miracle. So I'm excited to watch McDermott. I'm excited to see how he attacks Rodgers. Again, situational blitzing and also the addition of Taylor Rapp is something that I'm really pumped to watch, because I think both of these things, as well as your defensive front, which I think should be very effective, do one key thing, and that's make your Mike's life way easier. And that could really benefit Terrell Bernard in this game.
Well, talking about Bernard and talking about that situational blitzing and the idea that it's the front four that you want to get pressure, I think some of those guys in that behind the front four are some of their best traits are blitzing. Taron Johnson, when he comes in on a blitz, it's like he's fired out of a cannon. Matt Milano, you want to be able to blitz him in situational football. Even though he's great in coverage, he's also a disruptor. Terrell Bernard, you look at his college tape, like he was coming in on blitzes like a bat out of hell. Like you have all these guys, Taylor Rapp. Honestly, both Jordan and Micah can do it from the safety spot coming out of nowhere, and they've done that. So you have a lot of different pieces that are good at just shooting gaps, coming in and wreaking havoc. I think you got to dig into that a little bit more and utilize it and utilize those guys' athleticism and play to their strengths.
I agree with that. And I actually, this is a fun little question that's been prompted by Dave Lewandowski here. I was wondering, would we have been better off keeping Edmonds and letting Poyer go, considering we picked up Taylor Rapp? What do you think about this, Aaron?
I don't totally remember the timeline of events as to when everybody was signed. It's tough, I think. I think the Bills tried to keep Tremaine Edmonds. I really do. That contract that he got in Chicago is very aggressive. Right. And as I might be the biggest Tremaine Edmonds supporter on the Cover One network and just rode with him as much as everybody tried to trash me for it. And I even kind of backed off once I saw what he got in Chicago. And I was like, damn, that is probably too much. And so I don't even know if those moves kind of negate each other in the way that we're thinking. But yeah, on paper, I do think his loss, and not just his loss in terms of like, oh, he's some great linebacker that's super productive, but just the athleticism and body type and the type of workload and responsibility that they gave to him because of that in the middle of the field no longer can be done. Right. And so you have to shift. Other people's responsibilities have to take over that space that you now lack the ability to cover. And so just having that ability was huge, and I'm going to miss it. But that's the nature of this situation where you're in a salary cap and you have young teams who see that value and will overpay. And so I'm glad Bean didn't go too crazy and overpay. I think they'll be able to fix the middle linebacker position. Right now, it's kind of going to get duct taped together for the year. And I think that will be okay. I think they'll still have a super productive defense. And to your point, be able to hide some of that. But yeah, it's not ideal for sure. But getting Rapp in your building this year, Poyer and Hyde are aging out. And while I don't think they're going to have some like crazy off a cliff decline, I'm expecting a decline in their play and their athletic ability and some of what they were able to do and how effective they'll be able to do it. And I'm concerned about their ability to stay healthy at their age. Last season, Jordan Poyer was held together with duct tape and, slings and thrown out there and just braces. And Micah Hyde had a very significant injury and right now has been nursing back spasms or something. We heard he had a back and then he came out and just did some light work. We don't know what their health is going to be like. So getting Taylor Rapp in your building, I think, was an important move anyway. Last year, the Bills were dragging people off the street, literally. They had to go get Dean Marlowe back. They had to get, fill the practice squad with some safeties and you're reaching into your 5th, 6th safety options. That's not a good place to be in the NFL, especially the way Sean McDermott likes to play this defense. So Rapp is at the very least, even if we don't see the dreams of the thick dime, he's at very least better insurance than you had for your aging safeties a year ago. They were unsure of the health and status of Damar Hamlin at the time of free agency as well. And so I do think it's an added bonus that Damar Hamlin is healthy and playing and part of that safety room. I can see a scenario where they get an extension done here with Rapp going into the future this season. And their plan is let's ride Micah and Poyer until these contracts are up or until the wheels fall off. But then we have our future. I keep calling them kind of the poor man's Poyer and Hyde. And if you look at where Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer were in their career when they got to Buffalo, the experience and similarities of Taylor Rapp and Damar Hamlin aren't all that different to where they were coming into. And I have faith that they can get more out of those guys. And I'm not saying you're going to get 2 all-pro guys back there, but I do think that is the future succession plan. And so a long point to shorten up here to that answer that question is, I don't think those moves necessarily would have correlated with each other. That safety position, you got to plan for the future, and they wanted to give themselves insurance regardless of how Tremaine Edmunds' deal worked out.
Yep. And shout out to you, Carl. We appreciate you. Thank you so much for this. I expect to see a few safety blitzes with Hamlin. I think you could see it. Absolutely. I think he likes to bring safeties every now and then. I think
Hamlin's really good at blitzing. It's going to be hard if Poyer and Hyde are healthy to take either one of them off the field for Hamlin. That would be my only contention.
Yeah, no, I think that's what I was going to get to. I think Hamlin is capable, but I think why remove Poyer if he can do the same thing and he's going to be your general on the field. I wanted to pull this comment up again from Walter because, you sign Edmunds at $18 million per year, and we probably don't get Floyd, Puna, Rapp, and Poyer. Yeah,
and maybe one of those offensive linemen that were happy about the upgrade in the interior offensive line. It's a dangerous chicken or egg. What if? Game, right? I do think you could have probably structured. Greg had some structuring on the Edmunds deal that where you really kick some money down the road. But it would have limited their ability to add and do things other places for sure.
Yep. And then, just to kind of cap off this conversation, excuse me, middle linebacker isn't a high priority position and it doesn't garner that price tag. We will find a replacement soon enough, if not with what we have already. Yeah, I think fair. Yeah, I think that's fair. It's all about and I think the Bills have this strategy. You should, how you value just specific positions on your defense, on your offense, and how much are you willing to pay based on the market and how much of a role you could craft for them or versus the person that you could potentially replace them with. Edmunds was a unicorn size wise. Obviously you loved having this, whatever dinosaur you want to compare him to in the middle of the field that could take that away and make defenses respect it. But also, I think that was kind of a luxury, not an asset, because I do think that his position can be supplemented, like you alluded to before, Aaron, with just other facets of your defense. And to kind of finalize the topic, I think that's why it's more important that you kept Poyer and not Edmunds. While I do like Edmunds' game, I defended him as well. Poyer's veteran presence, as well as what you can get away with on the backside and your secondary with him and Hyde working in tandem, to me is far more valuable, just far more valuable. So I'll leave it at that. But let's move on now, Aaron, because the other side of this I wanted to talk to you about is Bills' offense and how they're going to attack a Jets defense that has seemed to stymie them last season. And you saw Allen struggle in that first game, which I got to see that in person. That was awesome. I'm 0-5 at Bills games, everybody. Great.
Yep.
But, you know, their defense has had their way with him each of the two matchups, thankfully able to win one of those matchups. They're a very, very reliant on quarters coverage team, quarters coverage defense, and they use it very strategically. What are your thoughts on just the Bills offense, Allen, Dorsey, everybody against this Jets defense?
Yeah, well, when the season ended, we kind of reviewed what was our problem. Like, what was the holdup? Why aren't we over that hump? At least I can't speak for Greg, but I came to the point of lack of protection. Protect Josh Allen was a big thing I was pushing and stomping the table for. And then it was Ken Dorsey. And while Ken Dorsey put up really good historic offensive production numbers, I felt like Josh Allen really put that up, right? Like they rode Josh Allen, and it was a lot of the success and production came from Josh making something out of nothing on a bad play gone wrong. And I was really frustrated with, I think Dawson Knox is a much better tight end than he's being talked about right now because of the addition of Kincaid. He's sort of being, he'll be, you know, attached to Spencer Brown. He's going to be more blocking and stuff like that. I think he's still super productive in pass game as an option. He's led the team in yak the last couple of years from the tight end position. So I was frustrated that Ken Dorsey couldn't make him more of a priority in the offense and in the progressions. He seemed to be that fourth, fifth option in the passing game when he was one of your more productive options. The inability to scheme efficiency into Gabe Davis's game, production was really frustrating because that conversation around Gabe Davis, I think, super unfair to the player in the way fans talk about him when you don't discuss how he was utilized and how it was a scheme. And all of that came back to Dorsey. And so I felt like, you know, the conversation was, hey, first round, you got to draft a receiver. You got to add these weapons. Dorsey needs weapons. And my concern was, cool, give him all the right grocery list, but can he make a meal? Can he do the cooking necessary to get these guys in position? Because I haven't seen it consistently and at a good degree in the ability to adjust to what you're seeing from a defense mid-game. So those are the concerns I have right now. And if you look at this matchup, how I would attack it, looking at this Jets defense and what they've done to us, I would throw a buttload of Eric Turner's been talking about it a lot. Get some motion going with this offense, move people around, see what they're doing ahead of this snap, get guys in position, dictate to the defense. I would use a lot of RPOs and small, just what we were talking about, keeping Aaron Rodgers clean and protected. We've seen this Jets defense just get to Josh too much. Even if it's not turned into sacks, it's hits after the play. It's the arms grabbing at his throwing motion arm. Like that whole Jets game that you experienced live was some of the most anxiety-riddled time I've ever watched Josh Allen. Like he was never comfortable. There wasn't a single play in that game where he felt good dropping back to throw the ball. And I just can't watch it. He's Western New York's absolute most valuable asset. You can't roll him out there in a game and just think you're going to drop back and take full drop backs, allow late progressions and go deep on teams like this. You got to really move the ball, pick your spots, get the run game. You increase the interior offensive line. You've got big bodies. The benefit of Spencer Brown is actually his run blocking. So utilize some of that in a game like this and get physical with a team that wants to be physical. Utilize Latavius Murray, utilize Damian Harris, and add some of the physicality to this offense to take some of that pressure off Josh. And then when you are in passing, it's RPOs. Make those guys pause up a second so they can't just pin their ears back at Josh. And so you can't pin your ears back. Be successful on these early downs. Get into positions where it's third and short and anything's in play. So they can't just pin their ear back and rush Josh with the waves. It's not just Quinnen Williams. It's not just Franklin Myers. Like it's not just McDonald. These guys are going to come in blitz of waves from the front four here. And they're going to end up hitting them. They're going to get pressure, but you just got to limit it because that keeping Josh clean is going to matter. And just, you have playmakers now. You have Deontay Hardy. You have Trent Sherfield. Get these guys the ball in space and see what happens. We've been asking for Yak. Now's the time to see it.
Yes, Yak, the beautiful term that we discussed in Spaces yesterday.
Retired Warvets. Yeah, the two tight end sets. Like, let's get big and physical. You got the pieces, Dorsey. Go use them. Yeah,
absolutely. Like, again, I criticized Dorsey. I also saw kind of his side on it too, because when it came to things like Gabe Davis, I think it was a systemic issue with really lack of middle of the field production. And some of that was also on Allen not seeing it. I do think he could have schemed Knox better, but Knox also had times where he was wide open. And I feel like the offense got into kind of a rhythm of bad habits.
He would be wide open. Here's my contention. He'd be wide open, but he would be the whatever progression. And so Josh still has to operate within the progressions of the offense, but Dorsey could have had the ability to say, hey, like this guy is getting open frequently. Let's make him the second progression.
Right. No, and I agree with that. And I do think that there is opportunity to improve on that with your tight ends this year. One thing that I did want to bring up, though, is what makes the Jets so tricky. Again, they are a quarters coverage defense, and they do not blitz. They don't. Last year, they blitzed. I have the graphic up. The tendency was 16.9%, and they were 30th in the league at it. Yet, they still brought some of the most pressure in the league, I think 6 most. So that is really hard to fight against.
Too, though.
It does.
Coverage, right?
Absolutely. Because if you have good sticky coverage in the back end of the field, especially with some of the great corners that the Jets have, you got to hold the ball. But I agree with you that it can't just be long developing routes. And I've been very passionate about this because you see what the Jets have done to you twice last season, right? Mm. So to me in this game, and I'm someone who has defended Dorsey, there's no excuse to trot out your game plan from last season again. You have literally none. Because again, 12 personnel with the 2 tight end sets with Knox and Kincaid, you have the opportunity to exploit what I think is your most favorable matchup, which is the linebackers. Yeah. I think you can beat those linebackers and have Kincaid get himself open with some great footwork and route running. Same thing for Knox. But also, again, if you're running motion with Deontay Hardy and you draw maybe the linebacker or whoever's on him out of the box, you create space. So I just see the opportunity for this Bills offense to really thrive on attacking the Jets defense effectively and efficiently. I do believe in Yak in this offense. And I believe in it because while in past seasons, we haven't really gotten to see it as much as we would have liked, even if we speculated on it, I truly believe, and you could call me a foolish optimist for this year is different. I do. I think the personnel that you've added to your offense, including your running backs, including your offensive line acquisitions, including the tight ends and receivers, are all capable of, one, helping Josh have an option that's going to be open really immediately so the offensive line does not have to stress itself out and block on long developing routes, but also get the ball in the hands while there's space in the coverage and move. And it doesn't have to be 10, 15 yards every time, but those little chunks that they can get 2 to 3 extra yards, I think are the reason that this Bills offense is going to be the most efficient. Because again, you alluded to it, Aaron, when you talk about the thing that I think was a huge issue last year, it was their position on the field in first and second and third. How far away were they from the chains? And a lot of the time, they were really far. And I had a huge problem with it. I felt like there was a much more efficient point of attack that they could do, but seem to just, again, fall into a trend of bad habits. So what I want to see out of them in the passing game is rely on your tight ends, rely on your receivers, use motion, like you said, stick to that 12 personnel and give their linebackers and whoever's coming up to defend hell, because that will take everything else. It'll open everything up for you up top. And then, of course, I'm sorry, go on, Aaron.
Yeah, James Cook in that passing game, too. We're talking about the tight ends, but if you're talking about those linebackers, get them in space with James Cook and utilize that passing game. We saw here talking about, Bills plus screen equals cringe. I don't know that the Jets' defensive style lends great to screens because that quarters coverage is tough to really set up against. But there are going to be matchups that really favor a good screen game. And that's, I think, when you look at some of the teams that lead the league in Yak and they're getting guys the ball in that type of space where it is a screen or some type of little dump and allow the players to get clean block in and go. The other type of Yak is hard to necessarily create on your own in a play situation. But go ahead and further your point there.
Yeah, I was just going to say, to go on the other half of it too, I think this is a great opportunity for the Bills running offense because, like you said before, Spencer Brown, if there's one thing we know about him, he is a phenomenal downfield blocker when it comes to the running game. I think Torrance, I'm fully expecting Torrance to have that same level of success just from a look at him standpoint. He's a massive human being who can obviously use his weight to go forward. I think this is a big opportunity for the Bills to really establish their running game and establish it early. And I think they can. Again, the Jets stack the box. They're one of the highest teams in the league to do so. But I also think when you're dropping your linebackers back into coverage and you're sending a 4-man rush, again, RPO, bait them, make them think that Josh is about to sling it, then a delayed handoff to Cook or Harris or somebody and just drive it down their throat. Because again, I'm not expecting a James Cook 68-yard touchdown run. I'd love it. I'm not saying I won't. But I do think that it's possible to, again, beat them methodically. If they're going to send the hounds into coverage and Allen can't get the deep shot, then don't. Beat them a different way. And I think you have the personnel to do that.
Yeah, I do think there's going to be some opportunities to the same thing I said with they're going to force feed Trey White the ball or force feed the ball Trey White's way if Garrett Wilson's over there. And I think the Bills are going to do some of that too with Diggs. Like you have to prioritize constantly feeding him, even when there's a guy like Sauce Gardner lined up against him. Right. And I do think there'll be some opportunities, like you said, lull the defense up, get some of that help coming up, and there'll be opportunities to take those big shots. This Jets team is not impervious to giving that stuff up, but you can't just come out doing that. You have to bring them up. You have to get them falling asleep, get them thinking, and then hit them deep. So the low key and most annoying part about talking about this offense going against the defense for me is you brought up that early down where they're at in the drive. Penalties is a concern that have crept up this preseason. I don't know how much of it was also it's the refs preseason and they're calling stuff too tight or whatever, but at the beginning of the season, they do call stuff tighter and stuff. Yeah. That is still a concern to me of the Bills are too good and have too much efficiency on offense to just have the self-inflicted pre-snap penalty stuff. I can live with the post-snap stuff because that's all usually touchy stuff and usually questionable, but that pre-snap stuff, you cannot go, second down and have a penalty and put yourself back in that position, or on third down. They got to be able to stay ahead of the chains and remain the efficient offense that they've been proven that they can be.
100%. And again, Carl, man, we really appreciate this. Thank you so much. I think we will see more 12 personnel, but Dawson Knox maybe in the backfield to help out Spencer Brown as protection for Josh instead of on the line. Yes, but I also
have Reggie Gilliam can do some of that too.
I was going to say Gilliam's one option, but I also think you'll see that. But I do think it's going to be a situation where Allen's just holding the ball for no time at all. And there really isn't a reason to help Brown out. Because again, what Eric has alluded to was the Jets run a wide 9. So obviously you don't want to put Brown under that duress and have him kind of be stressed out trying to funnel him in. So what do you do to counter that? Do you either bring Knox up to the line and try to help him with that? Or can you just kind of bait them into making you think that that's what you're going to get away with and then just get the ball out quickly? I think it would be more of the latter. So I think, yes, you'll see it, but I don't think it's going to be like they have to attach Dawson Knox to his hip kind of thing. I don't think that's what he's alluding to either. I think
I think it'll be chips type stuff. Like all you really need is that split second. Sometimes get a guy off balance. We actually saw Eric posted that clip. One of the preseason games where Knox just leveled one of the dudes and put him right on his butt. He's a good blocker and he is a physical guy, but what I don't want to see happen, which I'm not accusing Carl of saying this, but I've seen really online is this idea that because Kincaid is expected to come in, my brake pumping is all the way off on Dalton Kincaid. I'm ready for him to become a huge weapon in this offense. I think it's a real priority. But that doesn't, to me, mean Dawson Knox is now just like we're going to use him in a traditional way and he's not going to get those tight end red. Like, I still think Dawson Knox is a big weapon in this passing game and in the red zone. So I don't expect that to go away. And you got to find ways to utilize them both. How I would do it, I would put guys like linebackers, and if you're going to play smaller nickel corners, I would get in those matchups with these two bigger body guys and put people in conflict and run some high-low type concept stuff and say, all right, Dawson Knox is going to be like a quick leak out. And then we're going to run, Kincaid on this other route. And one of these two guys is going to be open because you're going to have to make a decision and we're going to get the ball to that guy. And that's how I would play these two tight ends a lot. I want them out in coverage. But yes, I do think Knox, but Knox isn't the only one. Gabe Davis gives you the ability to motion him in and bring him in and create that type of chip. We've seen him use that, do that, have that ability. Yeah. Trent Sherfield's another one in his blocking ability and that physicality. So they've added so many different weapons and wrinkles and ways to create those same things, but you can change out the personnel.
Absolutely. And I think also big opportunity to kind of establish, because we've been talking about the screen game. This is your chance to kind of see if it works this year. It's your chance to kind of establish it, see how you can work as a unit, because they had a couple of good, successful screens in the preseason. Give it a shot. Honestly, man, I know it's week 1. It's a divisional rival. You got to come out of the gates hot. But at the same time, it's such an embryonic week of football. A lot of things get tested out. Let's see what you got with it, man. Let's see what you can run down the field. Yeah. And so, Aaron, I want to just kind of real quick, let's do one final topic because I know I got to go let you go soon, but let's just talk about some key matchups that you're interested in seeing in this game. Give me your thoughts on who you're excited to watch against who.
For excitement, it's really I don't like to hype up corner, wide receiver matchups all that much like ESPN does, especially when we're talking about these types of defenses where responsibility is so different. Bills Mafia gets so mad anytime a reception's given up without totally always understanding the concepts of the defense, right? Like I'm not trying to be a snob here, but Dane Jackson for years and Levi Wallace are huge, examples of this where it'd be cover 3 and they're covering their third and a 15-yard reception is given up, but they're right there and they make the tackle and there's no yards after catch and it keeps going on and you live to play another play and people are mad because they see the stat line and it's like Dane Jackson gave up 3 receptions or whatever it is. And you go back and you watch, it's like, well, he did his job, right? He did his job in coverage. So I hate to hype up those matchups, but really, God, do I want to see Trey White versus Garrett Wilson and Sauce Gardner versus Stephon Diggs and those types of battles and setting each other up for moves and how that's going to go about is probably the thing that is the most intriguing matchups to watch. Do you want me to give you the ones that I'm like losing sleep over?
Oh, for sure. Absolutely.
It's Spencer Brown, right? Like primarily, really the right side of the line, I would say. I'll add O'Cyrus Torrence into this because as excited as I am, and I'm glad that he came in and won the job, and I think he's a huge improvement to what they had in interior offensive line play from a year ago. We talk about experience a lot and responsibility and those types of things, and rookies are going to have some bumps along the way. It might not rear its head here week 1, but it might. And we know Spencer Brown hasn't proven to be the player that they are selling us to that he is, and that athleticism hasn't really translated to being a good pass blocker. He's tall, he's stiff. I haven't seen him be able to really use leverage on some of these bendy, twitchy guys, and they've got him on the other side of the ball. So I'm interested to see how the Jets play games with a guy that hasn't shown to be able to live up to his athleticism. He hasn't shown to live up to his ceiling and has been pretty bad in pass protection. Paired with a guy that's inexperienced and isn't light of foot. And yeah, he can get his arms on you and you might get in trouble, but maybe we can play some games. Maybe we can play some stunts and see and test these guys and see where their level of communication is. That's what I'd be looking at if I was the Jets. And that's probably the one thing that's going to keep me up the next couple of nights is like, man, Quinnen Williams and Will McDonald or Quinnen Williams and whoever it is playing some stunt type professional veteran move games in the front of that line and really just causing problems for those guys. And then it doesn't matter even if you have Dawson Knox coming into block. If they're confusing those two and they're kind of tripping over themselves, passing off blocks, doesn't matter what you do in terms of bringing in that extra protection.
I agree. Yeah. And that's something I'm definitely concerned about too, because I'm very optimistic about them this season, at least when they're healthy. For Brown and Torrance to kind of work in tandem together. But yeah, while they looked good or had good reps in certain preseason games, you're not seeing some of the dynamic concepts that D-lines can throw at you as often, right? So for Torrance, when you're in the preseason and you're asked to just block one guy and you do, and seldom situations where you might have to pass it off and take on someone else, I think it's going to get a lot more ramped up in week 1 against a very good defensive line. So prove to us that it wasn't a fluke in the preseason and that your play can sustain that way. And again, Spencer Brown, I just need to see improvement this year because it's a lot of pressure on the organization who very clearly hedged their bets on you as their future right tackle. Yeah. Are you worthy of that merit? Are you worthy of being the future right tackle? We need to see that you can play up to your ability. We know what you are in the run blocking game, but let's see how you pass protect. And let's see if this offense complements that kind of worry by, again, being a quick striking offense that doesn't need to depend on the right side of the line until it either has to or knows that it has a defense it can manipulate with long developing routes, like maybe the Raiders or someone along those lines.
Yeah, with Spencer too, run blocking's cool, but protecting Josh Allen's really all that is going to matter. So I agree, but I want to make the point for fans that are listening to us here. Right tackle situation across the entire NFL is not good, right? Yep. There's not a lot of talent. So even if he is going to be the Bills franchise guy, the ceiling does not have to be significant. Right now, he has played even at that right tackle being so bad, he's played below average in the tackle world. So if we can even get him up to average right tackle play, which still is going to have tons of warts. He's going to give up pressures. He's going to need additional help. But that is, Joe Marino talks about it a lot. We try to talk about it a lot on our show, is compare what you believe are your deficiencies of your team to the league. Because we get real caught up in just hyper focusing on this Bills roster. And you see Spencer Brown as this standout. Oh my God, we got this wart along our offensive line. How are we going to, but every team has it league wide. No matter where you look. So just compare it to your team. We don't need Spencer Brown to be some crazy freak athlete right tackle. We just need him to get to average. Right? And so to your point, I do think there's optimism that maybe we can get there with him.
Yeah. I'm not expecting all pro. I'm just expecting a jump of some kind because that's all you need. And yeah, I mean, you talk about it not being that great around the league. Also, depth is not that great around the league because finding premier tackle talent's tough. Look at what Miami's going through right now. And now they have to deal with a thinned out offensive line and a lot of struggle that's probably going to come with it for a timing based offense. So
you're right.
For me, my final matchup that I'm really excited to watch, obviously I could talk about tight ends, linebackers. I think that's a given we've talked about it on the show. Excited for Knox and Kincaid. I think they have the opportunity. My stat line projection for Kincaid is similar to what Laporta got against the Chiefs. I think you could see that, like key first downs, even if it's 4 receptions for like 36 yards. If he's getting first downs, that's all I care about, really. But D tackles versus Jets interior O-line is going to be my number one because I think that is a matchup that can win you the game automatically. I think that part of the field and your interior offensive line being healthy, generating pressure without double teams because they can't double team because there's just too much on the edges to account for with Floyd and Rousseau means that you are giving it making the middle of the field harder for Rodgers to see and process, making things much more tricky, keeping them on their toes, kind of playing into the hand that the running backs are now going to have to go outside. And then you have the best edge setting running defenders, or some of them in the league, to be able to be there to stop it. This game to me is going to be won by your D tackles. If they are creating pressure, wreaking havoc in the backfield, that is a trickle down effect to the rest of your defense. Your coverage can get trickier. You could have people go further back, drop more back into coverage. And most importantly, again, your middle linebacker does not have to do as much. In fact, you might even be able to shoot some gaps with him and just have some fun with Bernard on the field. So that's really my final matchup. But AQ, this was a blast of a discussion. I really appreciate you joining me today. It's so freaking awesome to finally get you on this show. I really appreciate you making time for me. Whatever you got going on, feel free to plug it before we sign off.
Yeah, I would just encourage everyone here. Game day is going to be a long day there on Monday. Enjoy the Sunday slate of games. Sit back, enjoy having football back. I'm so excited for real football. This might have been the longest. I know you're new here with the Cover One and content creating, but dude, this was a long off season for us content creators. So I'm happy to have real stuff to talk about here. And so in that vein of real stuff to talk about, obviously before the game, make sure you're checking in with the Air Raid Hour guys. They do a pregame show every week before the game, about an hour before kickoff. So make sure you're checking in with those guys. It's a great time. It's on YouTube. Watch them live. It's better than what you're going to probably see on TV. And then postgame show. Greg and I staying up way past our bedtime for all these primetime games here this year. And we're going to be there for you, regardless of the outcome of the game. We're going to be there for you here on the Cover One YouTube channel. So make sure you tune into that. And then every Wednesday, you can catch Greg and I doing a preview show. We bring on a guest from with the opposing team, go over both sides of the ball, talk about our predictions. It's a lot of fun. So you catch us in all of the great shows, this show, all the other ones. I think we got 12 shows the other day. I was doing a graphic for it, and we got 12 shows on the network. So something going on pretty much every day of the week for you. So if you're over here watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe and like button, and you'll know whoever's going live whenever. Because I see the chat going here, man. Saturday afternoon, you get a good poll over here. So it's always a good time to be in the chat watching these shows live, especially during the season, right?
Oh, for sure. And I love this time slot because it's kind of the best of both worlds. It's either you get a game preview or you get the benefit of the post Thursday of trickle down from that. So yeah, Aaron, again, I appreciate your time. For all of you that joined us in the chat today, thank you so much for both your input that we were happy to throw on our screen, as well as your contributions. That means the world to me and everyone here at Cover One. Again, please share this with your friends, share our page with your friends. Subscribe to the premium pass, drop likes on our videos. That is the lifeblood of this network. It helps keep this whole operation going. And again, I really just had so much fun today with this discussion. I'm looking forward to being able to do this throughout the season, some of these awesome previews with some awesome guests like Aaron. So on that note, everybody, enjoy your weekend. Monday is going to be an exciting one, but for tomorrow, sit back, relax. Hopefully you get some fall weather, enjoy some football, eat some wings, have a great time, stay safe. I appreciate all of you. And as always, go Bills. I will see you next Saturday.